Hello and welcome back to Build and Teach. In this tutorial, we'll be covering the request library in Python. Now, the request library is a very popular library used for sending HTTP requests and handling responses. It's typically used in web services and APIs, it's typically used with HTTP requests such as get, post, put, and delete. So let's review some HTTP protocol methods. So the first method we usually, and a common method we usually use is the get method. Now this method is used to retrieve data from a server. It's used to retrieve specific sources on a server, such as a web page, an image, or a JSON file, or to query an API using query parameters within the URL. So the URL will have this long string with query parameters. Second method we have is the post. This one's usually used to submit data to a server. So in this one, it's usually used to either send a form where you're sending data back to the server and it will retrieve this data and use it within the server, or within an API. It'll get data within the data contents and then it will retrieve data. It will return a response to you. The third method is the put method. And this one's used to update data on the server, so to update an existing resource, such as a record in a database. This one also is used in the request body, similar to the post. So the post will put data in the request body, so will the put. And then the fourth method is the delete method. This one is used when you want to delete a specific resource on the server, such as a file or a record in a database. And a delete does not include a body. So post and put includes a body, delete and get don't include a body. Now, typically there are responses that come back, HTTP status code responses that come back from the server. 200 is the one you're looking for. That one means that the request was successful. 201 means that the request was successful and a new resource has been created on the server. So 200 is that it returned the data. 201 is that a new resource has been created. 204 is request was successful, but the server has not returned any data. 400 is a bad request, so the request was invalid and the server cannot understand it. 401 is the request requires authentication and the client is not authenticated. 403 is the request is not allowed and the client does not have permission to access the requested resource. 404 is the request resource was not found on the server. And 500 is that the server encountered an error and failed. Now, to use the request library, we have to install the request. Now, you can use either pip or conda install. So within the terminal, you would write pip install and run it. I'm not going to do that because I already have it. Or conda install if you want to run it in the notebook. And it will just import that library if you don't have it. So we're going to start with sending a get request. Let me clear all outputs. Now we're using this API here that just returns some dummy data. You can use your own API if you want, but this one works for these examples. So in here we've imported the request library. We have a URL to this API. Then we use the get method. So we do request.get. We pass the URL. If the status code is 200, it means that the response was successful. We will record the JSON response in this variable, and we will print it. Else we will get an error status code. So you can see here that the response was successful, and it returns this data here from this API. To send a post, remember post uses the data or body section of the HTTP request. So here we're passing a URL, it's the same API. The only difference is we're using the post endpoint here. So we have this data dictionary with title, body, and then the user. Then we do response equals request.post, pass the URL and the data to the post, and then we should get a response back if there is no error. And you can see here that the response does come back, and we've printed what we've sent, right? So we've sent this data dictionary. When you're sending a put response, very similar to the post. So we're in here, we're going to say the endpoint will be post 1. We have some data. We do request.put, pass the URL and the data, wait for the response code of 200, and then we should get back a message if it's successful, and you can see here it is. Sending a delete, very similar. Import the request library, pass the URL. Here we're going to delete this resource, so request.delete the URL. If the status is completed, we will say post deleted successfully, else we have an error. So here we have the delete method being sent. And that's it for this. As usual, the resources are at the end of the tutorial. Thanks.